everyone, we have to start thinking about institutional food and food as a shared resource. So I really think institutional food is the sexiest food sector right now. Feeding is an act of caring and loving. Fourth, we need to mulch our soil to feed our guts. So I think we need to support a deeply rooted microbiome diet. And that's what Anne Beakley is doing. Anne Beakley is a biologist, she's an avid gardener, and she's also co-author of a book that I recommend all of you read. It's called Hidden Half of Nature. I love the book because she's really connecting the roots of a tree, of our soil, with the roots of our guts. And so I think it's a way that finally we can sort of think about healing not just our guts and ourselves, but our earth. As Anne said, after my cancer, I fell in love with good food. I spent a whole day and a half making this fantastic bean soup. And then finally, I want to end by sharing some inspiration. Two of my food heroes. The first one is Chef Roy Choi. How many of you guys have been following Local and the work that he's doing with fellow chefs? I think it's really fantastic. He's rallying other chefs, and he's working with Chef Daniel Patterson of San Francisco to take on fast food. So they opened their first fast food restaurant in a food desert in Watts, LA, and I'm really excited to go check out the food next week. But as Roy says, we are not trying to achieve anything with Local other than feed good food and create worthy jobs and bring smiles. We can change fast food because we are chefs. And Roy says everyone deserves good food. And then finally, this is my last slide. This is Dr. Steve Jones. He's a wheat geneticist from the Bread Lab. I think Chef Dan Barber wrote about Steve Jones. So he believes he wants to reclaim seeds as a public good. And so he's using old-fashioned ways of breeding to create seeds that create higher yield for farmers, better flavor for chefs, and better nutrition for people. And what I love is that he's working with bakers, he's working with farmers and millers, he's also working with the food industry. So he's working with King Arthur Flour, he's working with Patagonia Provisions, as well as Chipotle, to bring back fresh milled, whole wheat bread culture. And so this is my final pitch to you. United together as farmers, chefs, as doctors, scientists, entrepreneurs, as consumers and food ethnographers, let's create the future of food together that's delicious and nourishing, a food culture that is fresh, flavorful, and soulful, that we can feed to our children and to our communities and the world. Thank you.
Does it seem like it would be really appropriate to have a chef come next and talk to you? All right, let's do that. Bill Billenstein, will you come and share the soul of the chef with us?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thanks, June, for some insightful quotes there. Absolutely amazing. So, nudging the soul of a chef. I have nothing to disclose, but I'll give you a little background about myself. Christopher had the slide up earlier, so I won't go into too many details about it, but professional chef for over 25 years, professional the whole time, probably the later half of my life there. I currently work as a regional executive chef for Guggenheimer at Google, and my area is the United States. So I have about 14 cafes and 21 food spots. I've always had a background and a focus in healthy eating and plant-based foods, more recently the last couple years in plant-based foods, and as the slide that Christopher showed, I really got involved in this in around 2001 when I was at Virginia Tech. I was lucky enough to be a part of a program called the Right Track. Right Track was heart-healthy cuisine for the students of Virginia Tech at the time. We focused a lot on vegan and vegetarian cuisine. We got bashed up a lot right off the bat. We spent an entire summer rewriting recipes and trying to make them exciting to students. And that next semester it came back around, it really opened my eyes that we really can change perceptions by what we do and the work that we put in. So I'm a member of the Google Food Innovation Lab, now called the Google Food Lab, where I met Christopher, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And I really do believe that by joining healthcare professionals and culinarians and the rest of the industry, we can really affect a massive change. So a little bit about a pilot and a program that I was involved in. I met Christopher at the Google Food Innovation Lab, but I also met Sue Kim. Sue had an opportunity or saw an opportunity. Can we work with culinarians to reduce the reliance on salt or the use of salt to enhance flavors? She saw that there was a need for this in working with her patients and thought about really all the way down to the end user as the consumer. How does this play out to restaurant chefs and the food that they're serving people? And also the chefs themselves. But how would we go about doing this? And why would we want to do this? So, like I said, I really believe that there's a deep connection there. Chefs are the ones that source the food. Chefs are the ones that prepare the food. Given that they have their culinary knowledge, some of them think they have some basic nutritional knowledge. I thought I knew a lot about nutrition and about science and the body, but that's really the ultimate, we're the gatekeepers there, where we're sourcing, how we're preparing, and how we're serving things. And I think as we all look from day to day, we're all realizing that death, our health, everything that around us is tied to food and what we eat. So we tried to figure out how the heck are we going to do this, right? We've got a great idea. Sue sees this opportunity, but what can we do a little bit differently? We decided to apply some design thinking. We had a plan. It was a simple plan, but it was very fluid, very flexible, and what we think innovative, or could potentially be even more innovative. We knew that we wanted to set the stage with a real healthcare professional. And I say a real healthcare professional because not a chef who has a little bit of a nutritional background. Maybe I read 2 or 3 books. But a real healthcare professional, someone that can really help us understand the science and the why behind what we're doing and how the body reacts to things. We needed a chef. I'll stand up and take part of that role. But we also didn't need a chef to just hand over a packet of recipes. So many times we get handed things. I can reduce salt right now. I can cut sodium and I can cut fat right now by handing you a packet of recipes. Cuts the creativity. The chefs, I've had it done to me in my career. It kind of limits what we can do. So taking a design thinking process, we have a challenge. How do we solve for this challenge? What are the possibilities? And how can we get the chefs involved in designing this program with us? So we started with a survey and some fact-finding. We knew that we wanted to brainstorm with the chefs, but we had no basis on where to start unless we really figured out what it is that they know, or they think that they know about the body, sodium. There were a lot of different questions in there. We had a focus section in this session, and this was the deep dive. This was a very, very clinical session that really explained a lot about the functions of sodium in the body and why we absolutely need it. We're not trying to cut it out, we're not trying to eliminate it. I think that was a big key to the chefs, and I think of things that people miss a lot of the times. Chefs by nature, me, if you can get my attention for a couple minutes, pretty good. The chefs, if they don't have a busy event that day, maybe we could get 15. We realize now that this was a little bit long and a pretty big deep dive. They all found it very, very valuable, but they all did this within their day-to-day life. We had these 4 sessions. This went on over 6 months, and we had about 15 chefs involved coast to coast, so trying to coordinate this was a big deal too. But they got a lot out of those focus sections, which you'll see in a couple different slides. We then had an interactive session. So we've told you about what effects salt and sodium have in the body. You've got the knowledge from the scientific and the healthcare professional side. You're using this in your day-to-day operations. As you move throughout your operations, where do you think you can affect the most change? Where are some problem areas that we would traditionally see? And let's talk about this together. So here's the flexible part. We knew that we were going to do a workshop. We did this workshop last July. I was in charge of putting together the workshop with Sue's guidance. No idea really what I was doing until even the night before. I mean, I knew what I was doing, but I was taking the feedback from the chefs, and every time we'd have a session and every time we talk, we would peel back another layer and we'd have another different idea. So it was very, very, very flexible, and that's kind of the way that I like to work. So what do we do a little bit differently? We set up workshops. We couldn't get all the chefs together at once, but we gave them a palette of things to cook. We had grains, we had legumes, we had vegetables. Some prepared with a little bit of salt, some prepared with absolutely no salt at all. We built our toolkit with herbs and spices. Again, some with a little bit of sodium, some with a lot of sodium, some with none. But no matter if you were sitting in a conference room in Atlanta or a makeshift kitchen like this one in LA, all the chefs came to the table together with the same palette and the same ideas that we wanted to work on. So the chefs really hinged on techniques, and they really wanted to look at techniques and redeveloping techniques. And what came out of this workshop was basically we had our alternatives to salt. This was a lot of our kit. We had some techniques that we wanted to highlight and use. But what we really got down to was we came up with vegetable seasonings. We took another look at pickles and pickling liquids and how they were being used. Charred items, burning the heck out of them, right? You see burnt on menus all over the place. Is it a trendy thing, or is it really building flavor as we go? And we really wanted to reimagine spices. So vegetable seasonings. This started with the idea that we got from Dan Barber and his team, but what if we took the amount of salt that we were gonna put in something by weight, and we took 75% of that weight and we used a vegetable? We took it a little deeper because we don't like to waste anything, especially at Google or in Guggenheimer World. So we took vegetable scraps, beet peels, carrot peels. So say we took 75% of that weight of the carrot peel and we put in 25% of that weight of salt. We should have a reduction in sodium. What we found playing around in these workshops was that something like carrot peels doesn't really need an extra boost at all. Just a couple grains of salt will take it somewhere else. Again, looking at building flavor and not seasoning throughout the way. One of the chefs said it to me, and I did a little test at home, and it made perfect sense, is that when we're taught to cook, it's three fingers of salt. He said, that's the way they taught me to cook, chef. 3 fingers of salt every step of the way. We're building flavor, right? We're seasoning. And that is the traditional way that we've learned in our kitchens. I went home, I put a jar next to the stove, I started cooking, and every time I threw a pinch of salt, just instinctively and reflexively into that pan, I threw it into the jar next to me. I had a decent amount of salt for one dish. It's a behavioral change that needed to be made, and it really opened up my eyes. So that being said, if those 3 fingers or those 3 pinches were something else, even something as simple as taking our spent orange scraps from the juice bar, beautiful juicer, beautiful fresh juice, what do you do with this stuff? We grind it down and we have a little bit of orange flavoring. Again, 3 pinches, 3 fingers along the way, and building flavoring up. Pickles. Everybody loves pickles. The chefs now have a lot of interest around pickles. We have a lot of interest around fermented foods. We have a lot of interest around the gut. At the end of the day, people were throwing pickles in things, we found out, just because they go there. A pickle goes in a sandwich. Great, it's adding something to that sandwich, but the sandwich is a bigger culprit because of the processed bread and usually the processed meat. Our salads and our vinaigrettes often tend to be very heavy in sodium because of the way that we're either preparing, if it's a grain salad, and then our dressings, and then whatever we're gonna layer on top of that. So can we use the pickles to build flavor? Can we use the pickling liquid instead of making a vinaigrette? The chefs came up with all kinds of innovative and creative ideas, even as far as a pickled sandwich, where the wrappers on the outside are lettuce, and we're trying to get away from those standard traps that we fall into. They took a real interest to this. We started to look at vegetables that might be higher in salinity than other vegetables. So onions are slightly higher in salinity than most vegetables. Again, we had peels and scraps, and we needed to figure out something to do with them. We burned them, we charred them. We looked back to the beautiful sauces and moles and how we're building flavor. Because again, we're not 3 fingers and seasoning throughout the way. We're trying to build layers upon layers of flavor. So something as simple as onion peels or onions that are laying around, you can char the heck out of them. You can put them in a slow cooker. We put them in our combi oven, which is a combination steamer oven. You can do this sous vide, 185 degrees with a little bit of liquid, just enough to cover for 12 hours. And when we came in the next morning, we had this amazing flavorful base. If I gave it to you right now, you'd say, that's an awesome, amazing, flavorful base. It needs a little salt. That's fine. That's a natural perception, but we're not adding salt at that stage. We're just using this as the base as we build. It builds a beautiful, earthy tone. So we smoked things. We smoked a lot of things. Not here in Denver, sorry. But maybe that's a different conversation. But nuts, vegetables, fruits, meats, healthy fats, unhealthy fats, you name it. Sometimes smoking with 2 different types of wood chips or even teas or herbs themselves and layering these atop each other. Again, with our beet seasonings, with our earthful, flavorful bases, with our onion base. We're building flavor throughout the way, but we're not doing that 3 pinches of salt every time we made our way through there. The chefs brought stuff to the demo. They wanted to work on it, right? We asked them to be interactive. One of the things that I found fascinating was, hey, chef, check this out. I did a Google search for a sodium-free or a salt-free blend. You're not gonna see salt in there. There's 12 different, very colorful things. It kind of runs the gamut all over the place. I don't know what box you would put this in if you told me you were trying to cook a specific type of cuisine. We could probably try to pencil it into a box. But it doesn't really need to be that complicated. And what we found was, so we made that. We followed the proportions. It was too much. Too many herbs and too many spices overwhelmed the palate. Again, this isn't me standing here now. I'm telling you this, but this is the chefs, and we're interacting, and we're having this workshop. Sue's there with us. Christopher was in from time to time, and we played with these. So it actually had the opposite effect. We needed to have some sort of salivation happening. We needed to have a little bit of salinity. We needed to add salt to actually make that stuff go down and taste very well. So we said, can we look to the world cuisines? I talked about, can we put that into a box? Where would that fall on the spice spectrum? And we looked to traditional cuisines, and we looked to CIA and the menus of change principles that say to celebrate diversity and look to cultural and flavor profiles outside of your own. We tried to narrow that down to like, what are the 3 root flavorings or spices in there? Try to keep it simple and try to have fun with it. Try to create your own. I challenged everybody to create their own blend. We use things like dukkha, we use things like harissa, but what's out there that we don't know about? I've got a chef named Ram that I love. We had garam masala. I said, why don't you make ram masala? When somebody comes to your house, maybe you're cooking ram masala. So you've created this very unique blend and you're just pulling for another layer of flavor. So cooking demo, you're all sitting out there looking at me, what does this really mean? Nothing really credible, groundbreaking or innovative there. Maybe a couple interesting techniques and tricks. What it really means for me is that we didn't only listen to the chefs, we heard them. We gave them the power with the clinical studies, with the deep dive into the physiology with Dr. Sue. We let them assess their own knowledge. We let them assess their own units and really bring to the table what they thought they could affect change with. And they did change their menus. They took all those learnings and it started to reflect in healthier outcomes for menus. We talk a lot about outcome-based menus these days, and I'm a very strong believer in outcome-based menus. We didn't compromise palatability, and a lot of times taste improved. We're doing it through a lot of units right now. We look at where we're buying biscuits and things like that. Somewhere like Atlanta, Georgia, where they had to have the same biscuit every day, they don't know that they're eating a yogurt-based, highly reduced sodium biscuit right now because it's absolutely delicious. Next step is to tackle some other things. So, a resounding quote for me is that the chefs came out with an understanding of how salt reacts to the body and to food. Again, not just a chef saying this is the way, this is our approach, but a chef and a healthcare professional empowering each other to actually affect change. So we also saw, we didn't just hear, right? We asked, we listened, we heard, but we also saw that there really is a chance for industry alignment, and I think June pointed it out beautifully, and I know Arlin will as well, is that by partnering together and working through culinary literacy, we really can affect change on all levels. So the cooking at home, I think, is a perfect one. The pictures of the packaged foods and moving to the healthier vegetables. There's that space for culinary literacy. We work on that space with the Googlers and with Live Woo. We're working at this at the same time behind the scenes with our chefs so that we can all be talking the same language and talking the same, facing the same direction. The millennial word came up again, but we look at companies these days and now it's the next generation moving on, but if we don't start putting these building blocks in place now, we may lose bringing everything back to center and back to focus. And so I think today too, we look at these generations and you said they want to eat healthy. Sometimes they don't know how to do it. People think that they're committed to eating right. They think that they're committed to eating healthy and they want to exercise daily. We need to be able to support that. So again, how is this nudging the soul of a chef? What am I really doing up here? The aha moment. And that's the end, sorry. The aha moment for me was that chefs are consumers too, right? We have a beautiful picture of Jen from Top Chef. If any of you guys are fans, I think it was season 5, season 7, maybe you could call me out on that one, but that was really, this is a very powerful quote to me. I think I've taken away more from this pilot as a consumer of food rather than a creator of food. That came from one of the chefs themselves. And I really started to think about it. This is the part where I was supposed to rip off my chef's jacket and say, hey, I'm a consumer too, but it really, really is, and it shows to me that we made that behavioral shift. We made that nudge in the soul of a chef, that soul that always constantly grabs for 3 fingers of flavoring as we went through there in the seasoning. We're now changing the way that they think about the world around them and the food that they're purchasing and how they're preparing it. This transfers through to their work environments, but also their family environments. When they're going to parties, when they're going to potlucks, when they're cooking for friends and family, they've got this new knowledge that they can bring along with them. So where could it go from here? We're working on a couple of things. I think you all hopefully will have some ideas. We brought this back to the chefs. We brought this back to the food lab. We presented our findings. Again, it was just a pilot, so we learned a lot. We've got a long way to go, but the chefs themselves were very, very interested in sugar. Immediately, they wanted to know about sugar, and they wanted to know about fats and oils, but not necessarily cutting all the fats and oils. Where's the knowledge around healthy fats and oils and the things that we actually need? They then said, let's revisit salt again after we do this, because we talked a lot about the industry bliss point, right? The heavy saturated fats, the sugars, and the sodium to really get that bliss point. Can we create a new bliss point looking from our now literate backgrounds and using some techniques and a little forward-thinking action? So in closing, It has been said that approximately 10% of somebody's health can be determined by genetics. That's out of our control. It's also been said that about 30 to 40% of that is affected by the field of healthcare. That leaves about 40 to 50% that are lifestyle factors: exercise, sleep, diet. So working with healthcare professionals who capture a great part of that percentage, and chefs, the ones that prepare the food, not just for where they work, but also for themselves, we really do have a profound influence on consumers' health. Love to end on a quote. I'm known for some crazy ones. This one's very, very simple. To me, at the end of the day, we all have got to eat. There's no way around it. We all need to eat. I think we all desire to be healthy. I think we all need to work together on this and move in the same direction. So, thank you guys.
So I felt like for years people wanted me to tell them how many milligrams of this or that they needed, and then I'd figure it out and say, oh, and by the way, we'll make it healthy. Let's include someone like Bill. The new paradigm shift is start with Bill, lead with pleasure, joyfulness, flavor, and then maybe he can pull me behind on his coattails. That's where I would like to be. And then, once he does that and inspires all the other chefs, Arlin will scale it up. It will go national and global. No pressure, Arlin Wasserman. Please join the stage. Where can we go from here? Please welcome Arlin.
Thank you. So at dinner, Christopher last night said, I know you have more charts. Add more charts to your presentation. Then this morning he said, I bet you're going to go over on time. For those of you who have not seen a chart in maybe the last hour or so, rest assured, I love quantitative information. It's a key to scaling up. But before I get going, because I love quantitative information, it's really rare to get about 700 people with high nutritional literacy in one room, so I want you to participate in some quantitative research with me. I have been really inspired by the food at this conference, especially by the food that I saw Bill describe, and so I've been working on a little institutional food service concept myself. It is the pizza ramen. It's plant-forward dish. It's basically a serving of vegan ramen baked inside a bowl made out of pizza dough. And I want to ask, how many of you would be willing to eat this for lunch in about 45 minutes? Okay. How many of you would be willing to eat this if I told you it had more fat? Okay. How about if I told you it had more carbs? How I get it to have more carbs, I'm not sure, but. And how many of you would be willing to eat it if I told you it had more protein? Okay, we got some new adopters here. We're going to work on this one a little bit. This will not be outside the doors, but thank you for your participation. One of the reasons why this is important, why to know what moves you, is because culinarians plus doctors and healthcare professionals equal lasting change in the food industry. As many of you know, medical research and advice told us that if we did not eat 8 glasses of water, we were likely to start to wither up and fall down on the sidewalks. And this happened a lot up until the early 1990s when the bottled water industry was invented. And we could carry our water with us and not worry if we could make it to the next water fountain. And this simple intersection of a little culinary ingenuity, let's put the water in a bottle, and medical advice, you need to drink 8 glasses a day, created an $11.5 billion category in the food industry. It's been in decline a little bit because of concerns for the environment, but that's what we did. Then we said, lean meat. Chickens should be skinless, boneless, and without legs and wings. By doing that, we changed the way the entire chicken industry in the US operated. We also accidentally did something to the South American and European chicken industry. That's another story. And we basically reinvented the products in a $43 billion industry by linking culinary innovation, let's just serve the breasts, with advice, lean. Accidentally, we impacted a $30 billion industry, the pork industry, which had to re-engineer the genetics of an entire species to make it white instead of pink. They're now going back from that. And then we started to say, well, maybe we should eat a rainbow assortment of vegetables. And the notion that we should have different vegetables plus the culinary innovation of maybe we could put more than one kind of lettuce on a plate created the $3 billion bagged salad industry, because previously it was impossible to eat lettuce unless it was already cut and in a bag. We don't know how people did it before then. Culinarians and doctors equal lasting change in the food industry, in what we eat. So this means that together we can make lasting change coming out of this meeting. Food choices are important to our planet. You all probably know this. How many people were here last year? Okay, then you saw this exact slide. Food production takes 40% of all arable land on the planet. If it's not a swamp or a mountain, 40% of it's used to growing food. It's 40% of all fresh water use, and between 18 and 50% of all greenhouse gases. Livestock production, including the growing of crops for livestock production, makes up the largest share of that. Food choices are important to our health. Other people have better slides. The biggest thing for me is the land use impacts. I'm the environment guy, and as a consequence of our food choices, the average width of a vault in a grave has now doubled. All these lifestyle diseases also mean bigger corpses and bigger caskets, and more land dedicated to you-know-what. And food choices are important to our economy. In 1960, the gross domestic product of the US was almost $500 billion. Of that, healthcare was a $27 billion industry, not bad. And food, about 3 times bigger. It was a $74 billion industry. Fast forward to 2012, we've done so well as a country, $16.616 trillion economy in 2012, coming up out of the downturn, and the food industry has grown more than 20 times to a $1.38 trillion industry in the US. Healthcare is $2.9 trillion, or more than double. That's a 100-fold increase. As you saw from the prior slides, revenue sharing from you to the food industry is due because, again, those food choices have led to a dramatic increase in healthcare costs. That's because the decades of advice you've provided about what we should eat have caused us largely to change what we eat. You've been extremely effective. It's led us to be afraid of fat, fear the carb monster. And what's left? I mean, we're running out of macronutrients. Eat more protein, unless we come up with a 4th macronutrient. And so when we think about what is the food we should choose, the wonderful people that Bill serves, that June interviews, what drives our main food choices? What chose you, especially the person there in the middle of the center there, to eat the pizza ramen? One word: protein. Because without protein, we know if we do not get enough, many of us will faint, and others of us will have ridged fingernails. Outside of your clinical practices, how many of you have a friend or relative that suffers from these symptoms and protein insufficiency? Okay, good to know. In your clinical practices? Okay, good to know. So how much protein do we need? Well, Christopher said, I know you have these slides because we've given this presentation together, and I don't want to show these charts. Arlin, will you show these charts from the research we've done? Yes, I will show these charts, Christopher. Well, we know, a little bit more for men, a little bit less for women, but we need about 56 grams of total protein a day to get the estimated average requirement for the US adult population. That's at least half of us getting enough protein. And a little bit north of 60 for at least 99 out of 100 people to get sufficient protein. That's the recommended daily allowance. If we wanted to build muscle and be a performance athlete, maybe we'd need 1 gram per kilogram of body weight, or about 80 grams a day, if we wanted to, be like this and maintain this muscle mass. But how much do we eat in the country? Well, there's a little bit of uncertainty in this, but probably something like 113 grams a day on average. And of course, protein is based on grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So if we ever got to a BMI of 25, we would need less. And most of that protein comes from what we think of as traditional protein-rich foods. Yes, we get a little over 15% from liquid milk and grains, but most of it comes from foods we think of as proteins, especially red meats and also poultry and dairy and eggs, and about 3% from plant-based proteins in the US. And this hasn't moved all that much. Those proteins have different environmental impacts. You've probably heard variations about this before. This is the carbon footprint, or kilograms of CO2 equivalents per kilogram of edible food. Mammals have the big footprint, followed by poultry. Fish is a little bit all over the map. Eggs and dairy, and then plant-based foods. And this is the carbon footprint. If we did the water footprint or the land footprint, or what is the environmental impact, the ratios stay about the same. And why is that? It has to do with the efficiency of producing the food. If I want to serve you a pound of food, and there's about 4 ounces of edible kernels on a good ear of sweet corn, I could serve you 4 ears of corn and give you a pound of edible food. That's a pretty good meal, might be boring. You might want some of the non-sodium 16 or mix to sprinkle on it by the time you got to ear 3. But you know, it's a yummy meal. But what if I wanted to serve you a pound of boneless, skinless chicken breast? Knowing that corn is a key ingredient in chicken feed, I'd have to put almost 15 ears of corn into the front end of a chicken to get a pound of boneless, skinless chicken breast. If I did that to a pig, I'd need to put almost 7 pounds of corn in the front end of the pig to get an edible pound of pork, or maybe 10 pounds